The dry snap of plastic hitting the floor was the last thing I heard before my world went dark. My glasses flew off my face, ripped away with a violence that froze my blood. For a split second, I prayed it was an accident, but the silence that followed wasn't clumsy or guilty. It was cruel. It was calculated. Then came the stomp. 1, 2, 3. Jessica's voice, heavy with contempt, cut through the living room like a serrated knife. "Old deaf bat, hope you go blind too." I felt the ground beneath me crumble while my stories continued playing on the TV in the background, chatting away as if nothing had happened. I sat frozen in the recliner, my heart hammering against my ribs and my eyes burning. Without my specs, everything was a smear of color, a confusion of light and shadow. But I could see my son's silhouette perfectly, standing right there next to her. I could feel his presence, and above all, I could feel his silence. David didn't say a word. He didn't move. He didn't defend me. In that instant, I realized the hardest blow hadn't been the foot stomping on my glasses, but his cowardice. I swallowed hard. A wave of tears rose up from my chest, threatening to drown me, but I held it back. I stood up slowly, feeling the air, grasping for furniture I knew by heart. No one helped me. No one apologized. I walked toward my bedroom with my back straight, faking a dignity that was shattering into pieces on the inside. I closed the door behind me and leaned my forehead against the cool wood. Only then did I let the tears fall in silence. But before we continue, I want to extend a very special invitation to you. Please subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This helps me see that you support me and that you enjoy these stories. And comment down below. Tell me what city you are watching from. Now let's continue. I sat on the edge of the bed and gathered the remains of the glasses I had managed to salvage. One lens was shattered to dust. The other hung crookedly from the frame. Those glasses weren't just an object. They were my eyes. They were my independence. Without them, I could barely read, sew, or recognize the faces standing right in front of me. I thought about the money it had cost to buy them, how much I had scrimped and saved to see clearly again. And I thought about how easy it had been for her to destroy them. As I wiped my tears, the memories started hitting me, one after another. I saw David as a little boy, asleep on my chest, breathing easy while I calculated how to pay the next month's rent. I remembered the sleepless nights, the double shifts, the meals I skipped so he wouldn't go without. I remembered promising to protect him always. It's a strange kind of heartbreak, realizing the person you spent your life protecting is the one you need protection from. I never imagined that, so many years later, I would have to protect myself from him. Ever since Jessica came into our lives, the air in the house changed. At first, it was small comments, almost invisible jabs, that I spoke too loud, that I repeated things, that I was in the way in the kitchen. I would smile, apologize, try to shrink myself down so I wouldn't be a bother. Then came the orders disguised as advice, the looks of annoyance, the snickers when I didn't catch a joke. David always said the same thing. "Don't exaggerate, Mom." And I, out of love, kept my mouth shut. That night, as I listened to their muffled voices on the other side of the door, I knew a line had been crossed. They hadn't just destroyed my eyewear. They had destroyed the image they had of me as a weak, submissive woman, incapable of fighting back. Because something inside me, something that had been dormant for years, had just woken up. I stood and clicked on the small bedside lamp. The light was dim, but it was enough. I opened the bottom drawer, the one they never checked because they thought it only held old medicine bottles and junk mail. I pulled out a worn brown folder. Inside were the documents I had been quietly gathering for months. Deeds, bank statements, receipts, contracts, proof, my insurance, my exit strategy. As I laid them out on the bedspread, I felt the fear slowly transforming into cold determination. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to confront them tonight. I wasn't going to beg for respect. I had learned, perhaps too late, that respect isn't something you beg for. It's something you command with facts. I heard Jessica laughing from the living room. I heard David's voice answering her, trying to please her. Every sound was a reminder that I couldn't trust them anymore. I closed the folder and hid it again. I looked at myself in the small closet mirror, staring at my blurry reflection. Even so, I recognized something in my eyes, a steeliness I hadn't seen in years. I went to bed without dinner, hugging my pillow like a life raft. I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my glasses breaking. I heard the insult. I felt my son's silence. But between those painful memories, a new, insistent thought slipped in. I won't be here forever. When the dawn light started creeping through the window, I made a decision. I wouldn't be impulsive. I wouldn't be loud. I would be exact, measured, definitive. Because if there is one thing I have learned in 69 years of life, it's that women like me survive not by shouting, but by enduring. And when we endure for too long, we learn to strike where it hurts the most. I got up carefully, put on an old coat, and slipped out of the room without making a sound. No one saw me. No one stopped me. As I closed the front door behind me, I knew this would be the last day I would leave crying in silence. From this moment on, every step I took would have a purpose, and they, without even knowing it, had already started losing everything. For years, I believed silence was a form of love. I convinced myself that putting up with things, keeping my head down, and smiling was the price I had to pay to keep my son in my life. Every word I didn't say, every humiliation I let slide, I wrapped in a pious excuse. It's not that serious. She's just stressed. She'll get over it. Today I know it wasn't patience. It was fear. Fear of being left alone. Fear of becoming a burden. Fear of them closing the door on me for good. When I became a widow, my world shrank. My house, once full of conversations and shared routines, became too big and too quiet. David was the one who insisted I move in with them. "That way you won't be alone, Mom," he told me. And I wanted to believe him. I sold my small apartment, handed over my savings to help them buy this house, and walked in thinking it was a shared home. I never imagined that, over time, I would become an uncomfortable guest. In the beginning, Jessica was cordial. She asked if I slept well, offered me coffee, even drove me to the doctor. But little by little, her tone shifted. She started correcting me in front of others, sighing loudly when I spoke, making jokes about my age. "She just doesn't hear well anymore," she'd say, laughing as if I wasn't right there. I pretended not to hear, and sometimes I didn't even have to pretend. My hearing wasn't what it used to be, but my heart heard everything. I tried to talk to David several times, always alone, always walking on eggshells. I told him some comments hurt me, that I felt pushed aside. He would sigh, pat my hand, and give the same response. "Don't take it like that, Mom. She's just direct, she's not mean." I would nod, grateful for any crumb of affection, and go back to being quiet. I didn't want to be the reason for arguments in his marriage. I didn't want him to have to choose. Over time, I stopped inviting my friends over. Jessica said they made noise, took up space, that I talked too loud. I stopped cooking my favorite meals because she didn't like the smells. I stopped playing music, laughing, existing as I was. My world was reduced to my bedroom and the recliner in front of the TV, where my stories were the only place I still felt like I had company. That night with the glasses wasn't the first time she disrespected me. It was just the first time the violence was so clear I couldn't dress it up as something else. I remembered other scenes as I folded my clothes in the early morning light. The time she accidentally hid my hearing aid. The day she threw out my plants because they were clutter. The time she told a neighbor I wasn't all there in the head anymore. Every memory was a piece of a puzzle I had avoided putting together. What hurt the most wasn't her. It was David, his constant silence, the way he looked at the floor when she spoke down to me, his inability to say a single sentence to defend me. I had raised him to be strong, to be fair, to protect his own. At what point did he become so small in front of someone who yelled? That morning, I understood something essential. If I kept quiet, I wouldn't just lose myself. I would teach them that they could keep crossing lines without consequences. Love that isn't defended withers away, and respect that isn't demanded disappears. I opened the brown folder again and reviewed the documents. The deed was in David's name, yes, but a significant portion of the money had come from me. I had proof, bank statements, transfers, private contracts. I also had something else, a handwritten letter from my husband, kept for years, where he made his wish clear that I should never depend on anyone. Reading it, I felt his voice pushing me to do what I had to do. There is a special kind of clarity that comes when you realize you have nothing left to lose but your dignity. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel old or weak. I felt tired, yes, but lucid. And that lucidity was dangerous for people who thought they had me under control. I realized Jessica didn't despise me just for my age or my limitations. She despised me because I was a constant reminder of everything she couldn't fully control. My son's past, his conscience, his roots. At sunrise, when I returned home after slipping out without anyone noticing, David was still asleep. I watched him for a few seconds. I saw the boy he was, not the man who now avoided looking me in the eye. I felt a mix of love and disappointment so deep it took my breath away. But I didn't cry, not anymore. That morning, I acted as usual. I made breakfast, smiled, feigned normalcy. Jessica looked at me with disdain, noticing my broken glasses on the table. "Let's see if you're careful now," she said. I nodded in silence, not because I accepted her cruelty, but because I was already several steps ahead. As they left the house, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee in my hands. I looked around and understood that this place had never really been mine. And I also understood that I didn't need it to be mine to reclaim my dignity. Sometimes true strength isn't in staying and resisting, but in knowing when to start moving. That was the day I stopped staying silent for love. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. I simply started preparing the ground for something neither of them expected. Because the silence that had been my prison for years was about to become my most powerful weapon. My son's silence started hurting me long before that night with the glasses. It wasn't a sudden blow, but a slow, persistent wound that opened a little more each day. I learned to recognize it in small gestures, in how he avoided my gaze when his wife spoke poorly to me, in the way he pretended not to hear the insults, in the speed with which he changed the subject when I tried to explain how I felt. That morning, after breakfast, I watched him get ready for work. He put on his jacket without looking at me, checked his phone, and grabbed his keys. I was sitting at the table, my broken glasses in front of me. I said nothing. I waited. I needed to know if this time he would say something without me asking. "Son," I finally said, my voice controlled, "can we talk for a moment?" He stopped, uncomfortable. "Not now, Mom. I'm in a rush." "Just a minute." He sighed, that tired sigh I knew too well, and sat across from me. He looked at the glasses, then looked away. "About last night," I started. "It wasn't right." "You know how she is," he replied quickly. "She got carried away." "It wasn't an accident," I said. "She insulted me, she humiliated me, and you were right there." His silence was immediate. He lowered his head, fidgeted with his keys. "I didn't want to cause a problem," he muttered. That phrase went through me like a spear. Didn't want to cause a problem, as if I were the problem, as if my tears, my dignity, my old age were a nuisance that had to be hidden so life could go on happily. "And me?" I asked. "Am I not a problem when I get stepped on, when I get yelled at, when I get treated like I'm worth nothing?" He looked up for a second, but immediately looked down again. "Mom, don't exaggerate." That's when I understood everything. His silence wasn't fear, it was a choice. He had chosen comfort, apparent peace, the tranquility of not confronting his wife, even if that meant sacrificing me. When he left, I stayed seated for a long time, staring at the closed door. I felt a strange emptiness, as if something had permanently broken inside me. I no longer expected anything from him, and that certainty, painful as it was, also gave me clarity. That same day, I decided to go through the papers I had kept for years without giving them much importance. I opened an old box tucked away in the back of the closet. There were documents my husband had organized with obsessive neatness. Receipts, contracts, handwritten notes. Among them, I found something that made me sit up straight on the bed. It was a private agreement, signed when David and his wife bought the house. I had contributed a significant sum of money, almost all my savings. The paper specified that this money was not a gift but a loan, and that in case of conflict or abandonment, it had to be repaid or compensated. David had signed it. I had signed it. His wife hadn't. I remembered that day. My son had told me it was just a formality, that we'd never need to use it. I had trusted him. I always trusted him. But now that paper was proof that I wasn't as helpless as they thought. That afternoon, I heard something that finally opened my eyes completely. I was in my room with the door ajar when I heard their voices in the kitchen. They didn't know I was awake. "I can't stand having her here," Jessica said without hiding it. "She's getting worse every day, deaf, slow, useless." "Keep your voice down," David replied. "She might hear you." She laughed. "Hear me? Please, she doesn't even hear the TV." I felt the urge to go out and confront them, but I stayed still. Something told me to listen. "We have to do something," she continued. "This can't go on like this." "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "Find a solution. A place where they take care of her, a home, you know. That way we'll all be better off." My heart was pounding. "She's my mother," he said, hesitating. "And I'm your wife," she retorted. "You can't have us both." There was a long silence. Then the phrase, "I will never forget." "Let me think about it." He didn't say no. He didn't defend her. He didn't defend me. He was thinking about it as if I were an old piece of furniture, a load that could be shipped from one place to another. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the bed, back straight, reviewing every memory, every sacrifice, every moment I had put my son before myself. And I understood something painful. Love that demands no respect ends up becoming permission for abuse. By dawn, I made a definitive decision. It wasn't enough to plan an exit. I had to protect myself legally, emotionally, definitively. I made an appointment with a lawyer a neighbor had recommended. I didn't tell anyone. I smiled. I cooked. I continued being the harmless old lady they thought they knew. But inside, something had shifted. I was no longer waiting for my son to choose me. I was choosing myself. When they came back that night, Jessica shot me a mocking look when she saw my broken glasses. David avoided looking at me. I greeted them calmly, as always. I sat in front of the TV and pretended to watch my stories, even though everything looked blurry. While they talked amongst themselves, I understood that my son's silence had been the deepest betrayal of all. Not because he didn't love me, but because he preferred not to be inconvenienced. And that, to me, was unforgivable. I turned off the TV and stood up without saying a word. I walked to my room with a steady step. I closed the door, and I knew that from that moment on, every move I made would be guided by a single idea. No one would ever stomp on me again without paying a price. The appointment with the lawyer was at 10 in the morning. I arrived early, coat buttoned up tight, the brown folder pressed against my chest. I sat in the waiting room, watching people come and go, thinking how strange it was to be there for something that, for years, I refused to acknowledge. I needed protection too, not against strangers, but against my own family. When they called me in, I entered with a steady stride. The lawyer was a man with a quiet voice, the kind who listens more than he speaks. I told him everything without dramatizing. The living situation, the insults, my son's silence, the broken glasses, the conversation I had overheard about finding me a place. As I spoke, I surprised myself with how calm I was. I didn't cry, I didn't shake. It was as if by putting the words in order, the fear had stayed outside the office. I took out the documents and laid them on the table. He reviewed them carefully, asked precise questions, nodded several times. When he finished, he looked me in the eye and said something that still rings in my head. "You aren't helpless, Mrs. Higgins. You were just uninformed." Okay. He explained my options clearly. The promissory note I had signed with my son was valid. My contributions could be reclaimed. I could also protect my accounts, limit access, and create a record of any attempt at manipulation. He spoke to me about power of attorney, formal notifications, and how to document every humiliation without provoking unnecessary confrontations. I left there with a plan. Not an impulsive one, a legal one, irrefutable. That same day I went to the bank, changed PINs, canceled additional cards, asked for detailed statements, requested alerts for any movement. The woman who helped me was kind and patient. She spoke slowly, as if I couldn't keep up. I smiled and nodded. I let her believe whatever she wanted. Being underestimated, I learned, could also be an advantage. Then I went by the optometrist. I ordered new glasses, better than the old ones, more resistant. I paid without hesitating. Leaving there, I sat for a moment on a park bench. The sun hit my face and I felt a strange peace. It wasn't happiness yet, but it was the certainty of moving forward. At home, I kept acting as usual. I made dinner. I cleaned the kitchen. I answered in monosyllables when Jessica spoke to me with disdain. David barely said a word to me. I watched. I listened. I took mental notes of everything, every comment, every gesture, every omission. I started writing it all down in a small notebook I hid under the mattress. Dates, times, exact words, not for revenge, but so I wouldn't forget. Memory is a tricky thing when you love the people hurting you. You need ink to keep the truth straight. One afternoon, while folding clothes in the bedroom, I heard another conversation from the hallway. They were speaking in low voices, thinking I couldn't hear them. Jessica was saying that I wasn't well anymore, that I forgot things, that it was dangerous to leave me alone. David didn't contradict her. That silence confirmed what the lawyer had insinuated. They were building a narrative, one where I was the fragile one, the unstable one, the one who needed to be taken care of. That night, I wrote a letter, not for them, but for myself. In it, I put down my decisions, my boundaries, what I was willing to permit, and what I wasn't. I kept it with the documents. I felt like I was closing a chapter, saying goodbye to the woman who had put up with too much. The following days were a test of self-control. Jessica became more provocative. She made comments about nursing homes in front of me. She complained about my memory lapses when I asked her to repeat something. Once she even moved my things around and then accused me of being messy. I didn't react. I smiled. I nodded. Inside, every scene became one more piece of my defense. David avoided me. Sometimes I saw him looking at me with guilt, as if he wanted to say something, but he never did. I wasn't waiting for it anymore. I had stopped asking him for what he couldn't give me. One Friday afternoon, I got the call from the lawyer. He confirmed he had sent a formal notification to David, informing him of the agreement and my rights. It wasn't a threat, but a notice, a line in the sand. I hung up the phone with steady hands. I knew that letter would change the atmosphere of the house, and it did. When David arrived that night, his face was tense. Jessica was talking to him fast, nervous. I sat in the recliner with my stories on, pretending not to notice anything. He looked at me, wanted to speak, but she interrupted him. I kept watching the screen. Even without my new glasses, everything was still blurry. It didn't matter. I saw the essential things clearly. That night I went to bed early. From bed, I heard the argument in the kitchen. Cut off words, angry whispers. My name repeated like a problem. I didn't go out. I didn't intervene. I slept better than I had in weeks. I had stopped fighting against the current. Now I was swimming with it. At dawn, I got up and dressed calmly. I put away the notebook, the folder, the letter. Everything was ready. I didn't know exactly when the situation would explode, but I knew it would. And when it happened, I wouldn't be improvising. I would have answers. I would have proof. I would have, for the first time, the upper hand. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. At 69, with wrinkles and gray hair, I looked different. Not weaker, not more lost, decided. I had made the decision alone, without applause or witnesses, and I understood that the most important decisions in life are almost always made like that, in silence, with fear, but with a conviction that no longer asks for permission. The day they received the notification from the lawyer, the temperature in the house changed. I'm not talking about the weather, but the invisible air you breathe when something important is about to break. Jessica walked from one side to the other with her phone in her hand, muttering clipped phrases. David sat at the kitchen table and didn't move for long minutes, his gaze lost in nothingness. I watched from the recliner in silence, with my new glasses on, seeing every gesture with a clarity they didn't suspect yet. "This is an exaggeration," she finally said. "Your mother is crossing the line. How does she think she can send lawyers? What is she pretending to do, scare us?" David didn't answer right away. He ran his hand over his face, exhausted. "I don't know," he muttered, "but the paper is clear. I signed that agreement." "That was years ago," she replied. It's not valid anymore. Besides, look at her." She lowered her voice. "She's not well. She gets confused, hears bad, sees bad. Nobody is going to believe her." I felt a knot in my stomach, but I didn't move. I didn't react. They thought I was distracted with the soap opera, as always. They thought my world was limited to the screen and the loud volume of the TV. They didn't know that every word was sticking into me like a needle. "We have to get ahead of this," Jessica continued. "If we wait, this gets out of hand." "Get ahead how?" he asked. She leaned toward him and spoke in a low voice, confident. "Speaking with a doctor, with someone who can certify that she is no longer in a condition to make decisions alone. If we achieve that, everything else falls apart. The lawyer, the agreement, everything." My heart started beating wildly. For a moment, I thought my pulse would betray me, that they would realize I was listening. But I took a deep breath and stayed still. I had imagined this scenario. I had prepared my mind to hear it without crumbling. "You're saying," David started. "I'm saying it's the best thing for everyone," she interrupted him. "For her, too. A place where they take care of her, where she doesn't have to worry about anything, and we can live in peace." "She's my mother," he repeated without conviction. "And I am your wife," she replied firmly. "You can't keep postponing this." There was a long silence. I held my breath. I hoped to hear a no, a late defense, a minimal show of bravery. But what came was worse. "Let me think about it," David said again. That's when I understood that in his mind the decision was already made. He just needed time to convince himself he wasn't a monster for doing it. I felt a profound sadness, but also something new, a cold calm. There were no more doubts, no more hope, only facts. Before continuing, tell me here in the comments what you think of this story so far and what you would do in her place. Don't leave the video, because what comes next will give you goosebumps. Now let's continue. That night I went to bed early, but I didn't sleep. I heard how they talked in the room next door, how they lowered their voices when I passed through the hallway, how they moved with a fake normalcy. I was no longer part of their plans as a person, but as an obstacle. And obstacles in their logic get removed. The next morning, Jessica was especially nice. She made me breakfast, asked me how I had slept. She even offered to take me to the doctor to check my vision and hearing. Her tone was sweet, almost affectionate. If I didn't know her, I would have believed in her concern, but I saw beyond it. I saw the rush. I saw the calculation. "Thank you," I answered her. "I'll think about it." David looked at me with a mix of guilt and relief. Maybe he thought everything would resolve itself, that I would docilely accept what they were planning. He didn't know that, while they thought they were gaining ground, I had already taken steps they couldn't undo. That same afternoon, I received a message from the lawyer. He alerted me that he had been contacted by a colleague who worked with social services. Someone had asked about my situation, about my capacity to handle my affairs. He didn't mention names, but it wasn't necessary. I smiled bitterly. The plan had begun. I called the lawyer immediately. I told him what I had heard, word for word. He asked me to stay calm and told me something that gave me back control. "Don't do anything different. Continue as you have until now. Let them advance." I hung up the phone and felt strangely strong. When someone thinks they have you cornered, they usually make mistakes, and they made them. 2 days later, Jessica spoke on the phone in the kitchen without closing the door well. She thought I was in the bathroom. I heard her mention dates, names, even saying that the old lady refuses, but it doesn't matter. I took out the small recorder I had been carrying for days hidden in my apron pocket and turned it on. I didn't shake. I didn't hesitate. Every word was recorded. That night, when David asked me if I would accept going to the doctor for peace of mind, I looked him in the eye and nodded. "Sure," I said with a smile, "if that makes you two calmer." I saw the relief cross his face. They thought they had won. They thought I was surrendering. They didn't understand that my acceptance wasn't submission. It was strategy. The next day, while they went out to work, I sat in the kitchen and reviewed everything once more. Documents, recordings, notes. I was ready. I didn't know exactly how or when the final blow would land, but I knew something. I was no longer alone, nor helpless, nor uninformed. When they returned that night, Jessica spoke to me with a condescending tone, almost triumphant. David avoided looking at me. I went to my room early, as always, but this time, instead of crying, I closed my eyes with a firm certainty. When someone thinks they have beaten you, it is the best moment to prove them wrong. And as I turned off the light, I knew the regret waiting for them wouldn't be immediate, nor noisy. It would be slow, legal, irreversible, exactly as I had planned. The day began like any other. I made coffee, watered the patio plants, and sat for a few minutes to watch the news. Jessica left in a hurry, without saying goodbye. David grabbed his keys and muttered a "see you" without meeting my eyes. They closed the door and silence returned to the house. A different silence charged with electricity, like the air before a storm. I waited exactly 10 minutes. Then I opened my purse and took out the phone. I dialed the lawyer's number with steady hands. I told him a single sentence. "It's today." He responded with an acknowledgement that calmed me more than any promise. I hung up and breathed deep. There was no turning back. My first step was the bank. I arrived with time, asked to speak to the manager, and handed her a folder organized to the detail. Inside were the statements, the canceled authorizations, the activated alerts, and above all, a formal request to freeze any movement that didn't carry my signature in person. The manager read, nodded, and explained the procedure. She asked for patience. I nodded. Patience had been my training for years. I left the bank and walked 2 blocks to a notary. There, I signed a revocation of power of attorney and put on record that any attempt to represent me without my presence should be reported. The notary looked at me with respect, perhaps surprised to see a woman of my age so sure. I didn't care. I signed slowly, clear letters, no tremors. The next step was more delicate. I entered the clinic where Jessica had tried to get an evaluation. I asked to speak with the social worker. I didn't bring accusations. I brought documents. I showed her the lawyer's notification, the private agreement, my account statements, and finally, I played a fragment of the recording. Not everything, just enough. Her expression changed. She took notes, explained my rights, and assured me that any evaluation had to be voluntary and with guarantees. I left there with a stamped paper that said Certificate of Competency, a small paper, a huge shield. I returned home at noon. I sat at the kitchen table and ate slowly. I didn't rush. I didn't look at the clock. I knew the afternoon would bring news. And it did. The first message arrived at 2. David. "Mom, did you move something at the bank?" I read it and didn't answer. The second arrived 10 minutes later. "I can't access the account." I didn't answer that one either. The third, at 3, was a call. I let it ring. At 3:30, the phone vibrated with a message from Jessica. "What did you do?" I smiled. The invisible blow had hit the center. At 4, the doorbell rang. I opened the door calmly. David was pale. Jessica behind him had eyes burning with rage. "What is happening?" he asked. "Come in," I said. "Let's talk." They sat in front of me. I placed 3 envelopes on the table, one from the bank, one from the notary, one from the clinic. "This," I started, "is what is happening." Jessica tried to speak, but I raised my hand. "First you listen." I explained, without raising my voice, every step, the changed pins, the revoked access, the certificate of competency, the activated private agreement, the formal notification. There were no screams, there were no insults, only facts. "You can't do this," she said finally. "It's unfair." "Unfair," I replied, "was breaking my glasses and humiliating me. Unfair was planning my exit as if I were a piece of furniture. This is legal." David looked at me, falling apart. "Mom, I didn't know you would go this far." "I did," I said, "because I had been too close to the abyss for too long." Jessica stood up abruptly. "This is a betrayal." "No," I corrected. "This is protection." She took out her phone, nervous. "I'll call my lawyer." "Do it," I said. "Mine is already informed." There was a heavy silence. David put his hands to his head. "And now what?" he asked. "Now," I answered, "we are going to get things in order." I opened the first envelope and handed David a copy of the agreement, pointed to the underlined clause. "This money was not a gift, it was a loan and it has terms." Jessica looked at me with disbelief. "We don't have the money to pay that." "That is not my problem," I said. "I didn't have the currency to pay for the contempt either." I opened the second envelope. Here it states that no one can represent me or decide for me. Any attempt will be reported. I opened the third, and here it says that I am in full use of my faculties, just in case there was any doubt. Jessica pressed her lips together. David was breathing fast. "Mom," he said, "we can fix it. We can ask for forgiveness." "Forgiveness," I replied, "doesn't turn back time or repair the damage, but it can change the future if it goes accompanied by actions." "What actions?" she asked with a hard voice. "Respect," I said. "Distance and clear responsibilities." I stood up. "I won't leave today. This is also my house until we resolve the legal side. But from this moment, my things don't get touched. My space is respected, and any lack of respect will have consequences." Jessica wanted to reply, but David stopped her. "Enough," he said. "Enough." I looked at him. For the first time, he didn't avoid my eyes. "Let's calm down," he added, "and think." I nodded. "That's what you should have done from the beginning." That night, we ate dinner in silence. No one raised their voice. No one spoke badly to me. The invisible blow had changed the dynamic, not out of fear, but out of boundaries. I went to bed early. Before sleeping, I checked the notebook. I wrote a single line. Today, I recovered control. I turned off the light with a new piece. I knew it wasn't over, that the fall wouldn't be immediate, but I also knew something essential. When you take away the resources, the masks fall, and when they fall, the truth becomes inevitable. The tension could be cut with a knife. From the day of the invisible blow, the house stopped being a noisy battlefield and became a territory of vigilant silences. Jessica no longer yelled. She didn't insult. She didn't make scenes. But every gesture of hers was loaded with resentment, as if she were waiting for the exact moment to attack. David walked with slumped shoulders, trapped between guilt and fear. Like a child who knows he has done something wrong and can't find a way to fix it. I, on the other hand, felt strangely light. Not happy, not triumphant, light. Like someone who takes a weight off their shoulders after years of carrying it without realizing. The final confrontation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon when I returned from the market and found Jessica talking on the phone in the living room. She didn't lower her voice when she saw me enter. On the contrary, she seemed to want me to hear. "Yes, doctor," she was saying. "I do everything possible, but you know how she is. She gets confused. She gets upset. She thinks everyone is against her. It's sad, but also dangerous." I stopped in my tracks. I felt a chill run down my back. It wasn't a casual conversation. It was a clear and desperate attempt to construct a version where I was the unstable old woman. I hung up the grocery bags calmly and got a little closer. "Yes, sure," she continued. "I understand that these processes take time, but we can't wait for something serious to happen." Then I cleared my throat softly. "Excuse me," I said. "Were you talking about me?" Jessica jumped, covered the phone with her hand. "It's none of your business," she answered nervously. "Of course it is," I replied. "You are talking about my mental health." She hung up abruptly and stood up. "Were you hiding to listen?" "No," I answered. "I was walking into my own home. The difference is important." David appeared from the hallway, alerted by the tone of our voices. "What's wrong?" he asked. "What's wrong," I said, looking at him, "is that your wife just tried again to present me as an incompetent person, and this time right in front of me." Jessica crossed her arms. "Don't lie, I was just asking for guidance." "Guidance to get rid of me," I replied. "It's not the first time, nor will it be the last if no one draws a line." David looked at his wife, then at me, took a deep breath. "Enough," he said. "That's enough." She looked at him incredulously. "You're telling me enough?" "Yes," he answered, with a firmness I didn't recognize in him. "You." The silence that followed was so dense it almost hurt. "You've spent months humiliating my mother," he continued. "You insulted her. You treated her as if she was worth nothing, and when she defended herself, you tried to make her look crazy. That's over." Jessica opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "Do you realize what you're saying?" she whispered finally. I'm trying to protect you." "No," he replied. "You're trying to control everything, even me." I watched them without intervening. I didn't need to. The fall had already started, and I wasn't provoking it. Their own words were. "If you keep this up," David said, "you're gonna lose me." She laughed, a bitter laugh. "And so what? You'll stay with her, with a deaf old lady who's useless now?" Before he could react, I spoke. "I was never weak," I said with a calm voice. "I was just patient, and you confused my patience with permission." Jessica looked at me with hate. "You divided us." "No," I answered. "I just stopped letting myself be stepped on. The division was already there. You created it." She took a step toward me, threatening. "You're going to regret this." "No," I said. "You already are." David stepped between us. "Don't talk to her like that," he ordered. "Not one more time." That was when she lost control. She screamed, cried, threw accusations, brought up old resentments. She said she had done everything for the family, that nobody understood her, that I was a burden. Every word sank her deeper. Every sentence showed her true face. When she finished, exhausted, I looked her in the eye. "You have two options," I told her. "The first is to keep going down this road and face the legal and family consequences of your actions. The second is to accept that there are boundaries here that you are never going to cross again." "And who are you to set them?" she spat. "I am the owner of my life," I answered, "and that is enough." David took a breath. "I want you to leave for a few days," he told her. "I need to think." "Are you kicking me out?" she asked, incredulous. "I'm asking you for space," he corrected. "If you don't respect it, then yes, you will have to leave." She looked at him, looking for the old weakness. She didn't find it. For the first time, he didn't look down. "This doesn't stay like this," she said, grabbing her purse. "Nothing goes back to how it was before," I answered, "and it's better that way." The door closed behind her with a dry slam. David stood there, trembling. I walked over slowly. "This isn't how I imagined my life," he said, voice cracking. "Me neither," I answered, "but here we are." He sat down and covered his face with his hands. I didn't console him, not immediately. There were lessons that didn't need caresses, but time. That night, the house was silent. A different silence than before. It wasn't oppressive. It was honest. I went to bed knowing that the fall of the arrogant isn't always noisy. Sometimes it happens like this, in a regular living room, with words that can no longer be taken back. And as I closed my eyes, I knew the end was near. Not the end of the conflict, but the end of a chapter. Mine, finally, was beginning. The house remained silent after the door closed behind her. It wasn't a violent silence or one charged with tension, like the ones I had endured for months. It was a distinct silence. Clean, honest. One of those silences that doesn't scare you, but confirms that something has finished breaking and there is no turning back. David remained standing in the middle of the living room, shoulders slumped, as if a huge weight had suddenly been lifted off him and he didn't know how to hold himself up without it. I said nothing. I sat in the recliner, the same chair where I had been humiliated, and breathed deep. For the first time, that place didn't feel hostile. It was simply a room, nothing more. "Mom," he said finally, "forgive me." I didn't answer right away, not because I hadn't heard him, but because that word, "forgive me," didn't carry the same weight as before. For years I had waited for it. Now it arrived late. Not useless, but late. "Sit down," I told him calmly. He obeyed. I watched him closely. He had a tired face, red eyes, the expression of someone who has just realized he has lived wrong for a long time. I didn't feel triumph. I felt something deeper, clarity. "I'm not going to yell at you," I started. "I'm not going to reproach you for everything you did or didn't do either. You know what happened. You lived it. What I want now is for you to understand something." He nodded, in silence. "I was never weak," I continued. "I was never stupid. I was never a burden. I was patient. I was generous. I was a mother who put herself in last place too many times. And you," I paused, "confused that with me being able to withstand anything." He lowered his head. "I didn't know how to set boundaries," he said. Not with her and not with me. And that had consequences, I answered. For you, for me, for this house. He stayed quiet. I got up and walked slowly to the table where some of the envelopes and papers still were. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. The true document was already signed inside me. Listen to me well, I told him. I'm not leaving today, nor tomorrow. This house is also mine until we resolve it legally, and I don't plan on running away as if I had done something wrong, but things will not go back to how they were. I know, he whispered. From now on, I continued, my room is my space. No one enters without permission. My things don't get touched. My decisions get respected. And if at any moment you allow someone to humiliate me again, whoever it is, I will not stay silent. Not here, not anywhere. He looked up. I promise you. Don't promise me anything, I replied. Prove it to yourself. The silence settled between us again, but it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was necessary. That night I slept deeply, without starting awake, without fear. When I woke up, the sun was coming through the window with a softness I didn't remember. I got up early, dressed slowly, and made coffee just for me. I sat at the table and drank every sip like a small act of personal victory. David came out of his room later. He greeted me with a timid, respectful, "Good morning." He didn't say anything else. I didn't either. We no longer needed to fill the air with useless words. The following days were ones of silent adjustments. Jessica didn't come back. David started taking charge of things he used to delegate. He washed dishes. He tidied up. Even one day, he asked if I needed anything from the market. I didn't answer with irony or resentment. I simply said what I needed, without exaggerated thank yous, without guilt. A week later, I received a call from the lawyer. He confirmed that, after the recent moves and the sent notification, my legal position was solid. We could move forward with peace of mind. I hung up the phone and felt a deep relief. Not because I had won something material, but because I had stopped losing myself. That afternoon, I decided to do something symbolic. I took the clothes I didn't use anymore out of the closet, objects I had kept out of habit, memories that hurt more than they comforted. I filled 2 large boxes. One I donated, the other I left ready. I didn't know for what yet, but I knew that letting go was necessary. While I was organizing, I found the broken glasses. I had kept them without knowing why. I took them in my hands and observed them for a moment. The shattered lens reflected the light in 1,000 fragments. I thought about that night in front of the TV, about the insult, about the silence, about the woman I was then. I left them on the table, not as a painful memory, but as proof of something important. I survived. Days later, David sat in front of me with an envelope in his hand. I spoke to her, he told me. She wants to come get some things. I looked at him without flinching. She can come when I'm not here, I answered, and only for what is hers. He nodded. I understand. And another thing, I added, don't bring her back to this house without asking me. It's not just your house. It never was. I know, he said. I know now. When she came, I went out for a walk. I didn't want to see her. I didn't need her to close anything. The closure had already happened inside me. I walked several blocks. I breathed fresh air and felt a lightness I hadn't felt for years. I realized that, without noticing, I had lived shrunk down, asking for permission to exist. That was over. Upon returning, the house was silent again. David told me she had already left. I didn't ask anything else. That night, I sat in the recliner. I put on my stories and turned up the volume without apologizing. I got comfortable with my new glasses, seeing every detail with clarity, not because the soap opera was important, but because I was. I thought about all the women my age who live similar situations, the ones who stay quiet out of fear, the ones who endure out of love, the ones who believe it's too late to change something. I had believed it myself for a long time, but it wasn't late. It never was. As the weeks passed, I started planning my next move. Not fleeing, but choosing. Maybe a place of my own, maybe a small apartment, maybe staying. I didn't know yet. And for the first time, not having the immediate answer didn't distress me, because the decision would be mine. My son began to change. Not from one day to the next, but he changed. Sometimes he sat with me to drink coffee. Other times he asked me about things from the past. He wasn't looking for forgiveness. He was looking to understand. I answered only what I wanted to answer. The rest I kept for myself. One afternoon, while watering the plants, I looked at myself in the window reflection. I saw an older woman, yes, with wrinkles, with gray hair, but I also saw someone standing tall, present, owner of her space. I was never weak. I was resilient and now conscious. I understood that revenge isn't always screaming, expelling, or humiliating back. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is recovering your dignity. It is setting boundaries. It is living well. It is never again allowing them to make you feel less. That night, before sleeping, I opened the notebook where I had written everything down for months. I read the first page, written with fear, with shaking hands. Then I read the last one. I closed the notebook and put it in the back of the closet. I didn't need it anymore. I turned off the light with a serene smile. I didn't know exactly what awaited me in the future, but I did know something with absolute certainty. No one would stomp on me in silence again. No one would tear away my voice again. No one would mistake me for someone weak again, because at 69 years old, I had finally learned something essential. Strength isn't lost with age. It just wakes up. Today, I wake up earlier than before, not out of obligation, but because the silence of the morning doesn't weigh on me anymore. I make myself a coffee, sit by the window, and watch the light enter the house slowly. At 69, I understand something I took too long to learn. Peace doesn't arrive when others change, but when you decide to change your place in the story. For a long time, I believed that loving was enduring, that being a mother was staying quiet, that aging meant disappearing little by little so as not to bother anyone. I was wrong. Loving is also setting boundaries. Being a mother is not allowing humiliations. And aging is not fading out, but recognizing yourself with more clarity. I don't hold a grudge. A grudge ages the soul faster than the years, but I don't forget either, because forgetting would be to allow again what I never should have accepted. Today, I walk slower. Yes, I hear less. I see with the help of my glasses, but my voice is stronger than ever, and no one can snatch that away from me. My son is learning. I am too. I don't know what the future holds for us, but not knowing doesn't scare me anymore. For the first time, decisions aren't taken behind my back. They are taken with me, or they aren't taken. And that, for a woman who spent a lifetime feeling small inside her own home, is an immense victory. If you made it this far, I want to tell you something from the heart. It is never too late to say enough. It is never too late to choose yourself. It is never too late to recover your dignity, even if others have made you believe the opposite for years. And now, I want to hear from you. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like. That helps me keep sharing real, intense, and necessary stories like this one. Tell me in the comments what city you are watching this story from. What did you think? And above all, what would you have done in my place? I love reading the comments, knowing your experiences, and knowing I'm not alone. Thanks for staying until the end. I am a woman of 69 years, and this was my story.